All right, if everyone can hear me, please nod. Great. So once again, good morning. Welcome to CDSB's webinar on water-related disclosures, TCFD-aligned scenario analysis. My name is Julia Kislitsina. I'm the communications manager at CDSB, and I'm delighted to introduce our speakers today. My colleague in Berlin, Francesca Recanati, is the lead author of the upcoming CDSB Framework Application guidance on water-related disclosures. Francesca joined CDSB in 2020 as environmental specialist. She develops technical content to facilitate and foster reporting on natural capital, bringing her experience as sustainability consultant and academic researcher. She holds a PhD in information technology and master's in environmental engineering, both at Politecnico di Milano, with a research focus on quantitative assessment of the environmental sustainability of agri-food systems. She is a researcher on sustainable agriculture with the Barilla Center for Food and Nutrition and author of several scientific publications in peer-reviewed international journals, technical reports on food sustainability, and reviewer for international scientific journals and congresses. We are also joined today by Ariane Laporte-Bisquit and Rafael Camargo from WWF Germany. Ariane is the Water Risk Filter Project Manager. She is responsible for overseeing the ongoing evolution and implementation of the Water Risk Filter strategy. She leads on the engagement with investor and corporate users of the tool in collaboration with the wider WWF network. Last but not least, Rafael is the technical lead of the Water Risk Filter and makes the bridge between science and the project. Rafael is responsible for the maintenance, ongoing technological developments, and guarantees that the tool applies the best available data and technologies for water risk assessment and scenario analysis. Just before I hand over to Francesca, a couple of words about the webinar. The webinar is live streamed on CDSB's YouTube channel, as well as on LinkedIn and Facebook. To ask your questions or to comment, simply type in the chat under the video on any of the platforms. Alternatively, you can send us questions via email info@cdsb.net. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, but please feel free to ask questions or share your comments whenever you have them. Without further ado, I'm happy to hand over to Francesca.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Julia, for the introduction. And before deep diving into water guidance, and water-related risks and scenarios analysis, let me start off with a brief introduction on CDSB. For those who are not familiar with what CDSB is and what we do, CDSB is a consortium of environmental and business NGOs set up in 2007 at the World Economic Forum in Davos, with the mission to support the provision of decision-useful environmental information to the capital markets via the mainstream corporate report. When we say mainstream report, just to clarify the concept, we mean annual reporting packages in which organizations are required to deliver their audited financial results under the corporate compliance or security laws of the country in which they operate. Common names that are used to name mainstream report are annual reports, financial filings, registration documents, and so on. The strategic direction to accomplish the CDSB mission is led by the CDSB board. It is composed of 9 organizations, and you see the logos on the slide. And CDSB, and the chair is chaired by the World Economic Forum, and CDSB Secretariat is hosted by CDP. But how we achieve our mission more practically is by offering the CDSB framework, a framework for reporting environmental and climate information in the mainstream report. So the framework includes 7 guiding principles, so the how to report, the 2L reporting requirements, so the what to report, that cover from governance to risk and opportunity assessment to future outlook. The framework is fully aligned with the TCFD recommendation and principles, and the TCFD was developed based on CDSB framework and other leading reporting framework. Therefore, the framework is complementary to existing reporting provisions like CDP questionnaires, GRI, SASB, and existing regulations. It is also referenced in the EU non-financial directive, the non-financial reporting directive guidance and stock exchanges guidance globally. So in addition to the framework, we provide a series of supplementary guides for the users of the CDSB framework and reporters disclosing in line with other major global frameworks and standards. These guide seeks to improve the quality of disclosure of material information in mainstream corporate reports, and they focus on the first six requirements of the CDSB framework, and we will see them better later, and are designed to provide company with a hands-on how to and what to assistance. So the publication of this guidance is the suite of guidance is ongoing. So the first guidance was published last July on climate, and it is available on the CDSB website. While in spring 2021, we will launch the application guidance on water-related disclosure, or water guidance, as we will call it for the rest of this webinar. That is, again, the topic of this webinar with a focus on risk assessment and scenario analysis. Well, that said, let's have an overview of what this water guidance is and why it is useful. So the aim of the guidance is to support companies in reporting material water-related information in the mainstream report and in providing useful water-related information for investors. It adds a layer of practical details on the CDSB framework and integrates water-specific elements from existing reporting standards and framework on water. It is, as the framework, aligned with the TCFD recommendation and other global standards. To develop the water guidance, we are working with a fantastic working group of more than 60 water experts, including companies, investors, NGOs, academics, and consultants. And like, if you're interested in the entire working group, like there is a dedicated web page on our website. And as you can see from the slide, WWF, with the two great speakers of this webinar, Ariane and Rafael, is part of this working group, and they are greatly contributing to the development of the water guidance. Well, that said, let me give you a couple of additional details on the content of the guidance. So as already mentioned before, the water guidance focuses on the first six requirements of the CDSB framework. So as you can see from the table in the slide, it provides support in disclosing about water governance and management of water policies, strategies, and targets, and water-related risks and opportunities, and this is a crucial point of the today webinar, sources of impact on water resources and ecosystems, and water-related performance and future outlook. So in practice, for each of the requirements, the guidance provides detailed reporting suggestions and practical suggestions, I would add, and guidance to complement the CDSB reporting requirements, disclosure checklist, reference to useful external resources, and example of good practices from companies' mainstream reports. Luckily, we already have some. Water-specific reporting elements, aspects, and challenges included in the CDSB application, water application guidance have been drawn on existing water reporting standards and frameworks. For example, from CDP questionnaires, SASB sector-specific standards, GRI 303 on water and effluent, just to name a few. So these standards and framework are precious resources for, of course, like fundamental resources for the development of the guidance, and reviewing and analyzing those frameworks and standards allowed to identify key characteristics of water issues, management and relation between water and business, such as the need of contextualize in space and time the disclosure of water-related information, for example, where water is consumed or polluted in which basin, and the importance of engaging with stakeholders in a water basin when managing water resources. These standards and framework also allowed to explore water-related metrics and targets and the related challenges, I would add. And they also allowed to better understand the interconnection between water and other environmental aspects and issues, such as climate change. And this is a crucial aspect that will be explored later in this webinar through the lens of WWF water risk filter scenarios. The alignment with TCFD allows instead to provide crucial information on governance, strategy, risks, risk management, and metrics and targets that constitutes decision useful information for investors. Well, given this overview of the water guidance and its content, let's see how future outlook and scenarios analysis are incorporated in it. First, let's start from the starting point, so the CDSB framework. So outlook is the core of the CDSB reporting requirement number 6. So what is an outlook? It's not an easy concept. So it is a forward-looking summary, and like as a general definition, but the outlook summarizes conclusions about the effect of environmental impact, risks, and opportunities, so requirement 3, for those who are familiar with the CDSB framework, on the organization's future performance and position, such as its capacity to innovate or execute its strategies or create value over time. So the outlook draws on 2 key elements. First is the information disclosed in response to the requirement 1 to 5. So in particular, in explaining how the governance mechanism and management contributes and will contribute to the performance of the company and to the exploitation of opportunities, but also to the mitigation of impact and risks, like in this case on water. The second element that should be combined with the first one to create a comprehensive outlook regard the company's knowledge of trends and drivers that might affect its future performance and position, such as changes in environmental regulation, and again, water in this case. Scenario analysis can be a useful tool to investigate such trends and drivers and understand resilience of the organization over different time horizons. There is no special or correct formula or way of conducting scenario analysis. It can be based on quantitative models and tools like the WWF water risk filter tool and related TCFD-aligned scenario analysis, or it can be based on more qualitative assessments and considerations. An outlook is useful when, just to conclude, it enables investors to understand the resilience of the company to a suite of possible future scenarios. And as Ariane and Rafael will explain later, the WWF water risk filter tool can support the journey from risk assessment to resilience, since it can help evaluate and inform long-term resilience planning and strategy. So focusing on water-related outlook, so exploring water-related trends and drivers that will influence the future company's water dependencies, impacts, risks, and opportunities is challenging. Also due to the interconnected nature of water. So just to provide a couple of examples. So socioeconomic scenarios, so the population growth, for example, will influence water demand in the basin of operation of a company, for example. Or climate change and land use change will affect water supply. Again, just to name a couple. So to support companies in effectively disclose their water-related outlook, the water application guidance will include a checklist on outlook disclosure, underlining the importance of the assessment of the effect of future water-related impact and risks on the company performance, and underlining also the importance of the description of adopted techniques, such as scenario analysis and considered time horizons. The guidance will also include useful resources that can support companies in preparing forward-looking and effective outlook. But one of these crucial resources is the WWF water risk filter tool and its scenarios. That is one of the available tools to support both the assessment of water-related risks, so requirement 3 of the CDSB framework and water guidance, and to perform water-related scenario analysis, so requirement 6. This tool allows to better understand how future water-related scenarios look like and will be included in the final version of the guidance that will be published in April 2021. In light of this, before giving the floor to Ariane and Rafael, I just wanted to give you a couple of details about the progress of the guidance. It is now under review by the member of the Water Working Group. It will be tested by company through pilot groups, and a 90-day public consultation will run from November 25th to the end of February. So check out our social media channels and newsletter to stay up to date. So watch this space. And of course, if you are more than welcome to contribute via both pilot groups, for example, or public consultation. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. So as said, the final version of the guidance will include useful resources and examples of good practices to support companies in preparing their water-related information to be included in the mainstream report. And the WWF water filter risk will be one of those resources. Just a couple of comments on this tool. This tool allowed to explore the link between climate and water-related risks and sheds light also on the crucial regulatory and reputational risk and the rated plausible future scenario. So this tool really support the integration of water into TCFD-aligned scenario analysis and will strengthen for sure the disclosure and assessment of companies' resilience to future scenario. That said, so thank you. And I will hand over to Ariane Laporte-Bisquit, Project Manager of Water Risk Filter at WWF. And Ariane, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good day, everyone. Could you just confirm you can hear me correctly? Yes, great. So good day, everyone, and thank you so much for the introduction. A big thank you to the CDSB team for this great opportunity to present to you all the latest new water risk filter scenarios launched this month. So for those of you not so familiar with the WWF water risk filter tool, I will first give you a quick and basic introduction. Essentially, the water risk filter tool is a free, practical, online tool and designed to be used by companies and financial institutions to assess, value, and respond to their water risk. And I'll give you a quick overview of the key functionalities of the tool. So first, since it was launched in 2012, the tool is at its core a practical tool to enable companies and investors to conduct a water risk assessment, to understand their exposure to both basin and operational water risks. The tool expanded in 2019 from being a risk assessment tool to also provide recommended response actions to identified water risks, therefore guiding users from risk to contextual response actions. Now, with the launch this month of our new water risk filter scenarios, users can now explore forward-looking scenarios aligned to TCFD to better understand future water risks and build resilience. Whilst we will, of course, be focusing this webinar on the new water risk scenarios, I also did just want to briefly flag that we have another exciting new and upcoming feature to watch out for in 2021, which is a new valuation tool being developed in collaboration with Water Foundry and powered by CDP data in order to help estimate financial impacts from water risks. So this is the full overview of all the different functionalities with regards to the water risk tool. But in the next slide, I just wanted to give you a brief overview of some of the users of the water risk filter tool. Since its launch in 2012, the water risk filter tool was widely used by many large multinationals from a range of different sectors, as illustrated with some examples in this slide. We now have almost over 6,000 registered users who have been analyzing waters for over 360,000 sites. So we've seen a great appetite and growth and increase with regards to interest from the private sector to understand their water risk and start taking action. On the next slide, you will be seeing that we actually, when we were developing the water risk filter scenarios, we had the chance to test out and are planning to work with some of our WF corporate partners, as for example, here you can see with Carlsberg, as well as the German food retailer Edeka and the biopharmaceutical company AstraZeneca. So when developing the tool, we've really been testing it out already. And in the next slides, I just wanted to say that before diving into more details of what are the water risk filter scenarios technically, I first wanted to give you a high-level guidance for how companies and investors can use the water risk filter tool and scenarios to turn risk into resilience. The first step, as you can see in this slide, is to use the water risk filter tool to understand your current water risk exposure and identify most material water risk hotspots on which to focus your contextual response. If you can just go back a slide, please. And the first step, for guidance and recommendations on how to conduct a water risk assessment, I encourage you to read this WF and WBCSD Right tool for the job report, which provides some very good recommendations and guidance. But after establishing a baseline of current risk exposure and responses, the next step is to then use the water risk filter scenarios to assess exposure to future water risks, and then understand how different types of water risk are likely to evolve in 2030 and 2050 under different scenarios. When doing a scenario analysis and understanding your future water risks with the water risk filter scenarios, it is important to identify also what are the key drivers of change to be able to set contextually appropriate responses, but also identify what are the most material sites and assets to face the greatest increase in risk, as those are likely to face the greatest challenge also for adaptation and therefore will require to focus resilience efforts. Now, in the next slide, after conducting a scenario analysis, it's important to use the outputs of the scenario analysis to evaluate whether the company's current strategy is adequately resilient, or will it need stronger resilience planning considering the future risk levels. As both climate and socioeconomic changes are uncertain, it's important to evaluate response and strategies to a range of possible futures, including a pessimistic pathway scenario in which water risks are likely to increase most significantly. So prepare for the worst. But in all cases, response actions should be contextually appropriate. And if a response action works well under different scenarios, it's likely to be well suited to change and therefore future fits. So the tool, and just so that you are aware, the tool does provide some recommendations to mitigate identified current water risks in the response section of the tool, which we're seeking to further develop and enhance, so that users will be able to explore how resilient different response actions are to under different scenarios and help identify opportunities for resilience. And the last but not least final step is to use the results from the water risk filter risk assessment and scenario analysis to disclose on material water risks, opportunities, as well as contextual response and strategies in mainstream reporting in line with the upcoming CDSB water guidance that you've heard about, and also via platforms such as CDP. The water risk filter tool really aims to provide reliable, consistent, and comparable information on current and future water risk, which in turn will help better inform, investors' decision-making needs and processes as recommended by TCFD. And in particular, I just wanted to flag that, as you're aware, as I mentioned, we are developing this new valuation tool. The acronym is WAVE, and we hope this will also help users with regards to understanding how potential financial impacts from water risks under different scenarios, and therefore convert risk into financial impact and strengthen disclosure on financial exposure. So do watch out for this new feature in the tool. But lastly, so after providing you that 4-step process of high-level guidance for users from understanding risk to resilience and reporting, let's now dive deeper into what exactly are the water risk filter scenarios, which I'm sure you're all wanting to find out. So when developing the scenarios, we aimed to apply the same approach as to the tool's current basin risk assessment framework by integrating 2030 and 2050 quantitative projections covering all types of water risks, as you can see here, really ranging from the TCFD focused physical risks such as acute physical risk, for example flooding, but also more chronic physical water risks such as scarcity, water quality, and ecosystem services. But also the water risk filter scenario also covers the less commonly explored, we could say, regulatory and reputational water risks, which, however, are critical to also consider as these can cause significant potential impacts if overlooked in particular. And so after this overview of the broad range of water risks that the water filter scenarios can cover, I will hand over to Rafael Camargo, who is the water filter technical lead, and he'll give you a more detailed technical overview of the water filter scenarios, as well as some practical examples of analysis applications. Over to Rafael. Thank you.
Thank you, Ariane. Thank you for all for joining this webinar today. Yeah, I'm glad to be here and to share a bit of our work at DataWF with you. And with this slide here, is just to remember, as Ariane just said, the water is filter scenarios is intended to be comprehensive and cover all those aspects of water risk. But we didn't model all of these in-house. Actually, we collaborate with many research groups across the globe, and we try to use their expertise in each of those very specific aspects. For example, we collaborate with IASA Water Program and the Water Scarcity Atlas. Is a team in the Aalto University in Finland, and we took the chance to use their experience of many years modeling exactly water scarcity. And then here we have the best available data for all those aspects. And now what we did is actually a compilation of all those aspects together and made it of easy access to all the corporates and financial institutions. And users now can have access of the projections of each of those risk categories, but can also look at more aggregated risks. For example, if you look at all those aspects together, then we will look at overall water risks. And this, in the next slide, we can see that overall water risks may and will probably evolve over time very different in those three different pathways. In an optimistic scenario where we see a world more sustainable in socioeconomic aspects, but also taking more ambitious actions towards reduction of CO2 emissions, the globe overall is to be less risky than today, but slightly. And the opposite is more pessimistic scenarios, more unequal and unsustainable socioeconomic developments and also high emission levels is more similar as we see today. We will end up in a world of very high risk pretty much across the whole globe. And you see in the map from light green to dark red is the variation from very low risk to more high risk or even extreme risk. And then this is pretty much related to temperature rise across the globe, but not only. And then it's very important to go back and look at the different aspects as we just saw in the previous slide. The next slide, we have a simple logic model of how the scenarios was built. It's pretty much, we took the current risks, what we have today, and people and business are already used to it. And then we add the projected changes. And so how the water scarcity or flooding will evolve over time. And this combination of these two different aspects is what we will see the future risks. And what we realize is that the regions that is already today with very high risk, and they are exactly the same ones that will see the greatest increase over time. And then was actually a need for us to create a new class of risk, which is now called extreme risk. And this we will be able to understand a bit more, a bit better in the next slide, where users now can go to the Water is Filter webpage and they can explore by themselves following this link below. And this is what you can see already in our webpage. You can explore different pathways ranging from this optimistic current trend to pessimistic pathway, and different time scale, and also different views as the absolute risk in the future or the changes between today and the future. But today we are also trying to show you a bit more of what we can do with the water risk filter scenarios. And there's many applications. For example, if a company take this data and apply it to their portfolio, and a company could be a manufacturer or a textile company or a financial institution, asset management with their portfolio of clients. And if we plot their location across the globe and we see their risk exposure, for example, as you see here, the color of the bubbles in the map, the red and darker tones are the highest risks. And then if we add to this layer the materiality of each of those sites, for example, production value or volume, then we see big bubbles representing high materiality sites, and darker shades in red is the highest risk. For us, it's a clear indication of the hotspots of water risks and perhaps where we need to spend a bit more efforts on taking actions to mitigate risks and to build resilience. And of course, we have to pay attention to the evolution of risk over time. For example, we can dig a bit deeper in this one specific site or in a cluster of sites and to see how risks evolve over time from today to the future. But it's also very important to look at what are the drivers of risk change. And one site or a portfolio can be very specific to one aspect of risk change or multiples. And in the next slide, we see, for example, we have those 12 categories of risk. And the first four you see, scarcity, flooding, quality, and ecosystem services more relate to physical risks. And then we see how one site or a portfolio is exposed to each of those risk categories, and we understand as drivers of risk change. And then we see how it may change in the future as these darker shades is the increasing risk by 2030 and 2050. And in one scenario, scarcity is likely to maintain the same, but in the optimistic, it may even decrease the risk if actions are taken towards a more sustainable world, more conscious use of water resources. The next slide, please. We can see another application is if we look at agricultural commodities and supply chain, we know from data sets out there of Earthstat data or MapSpan, the distribution of commodities production across the globe. And then we can look at what is the risk change over time in those specific regions so that we can identify which region is more likely to see greater changes and therefore it's needed more efforts for adaptation. But we can also be more specific and to understand if the risk is rather in scarcity or more in flooding. And so the more appropriate actions are taken designed to very specific risk profile in each of those regions. And another example of its application, we could look at hydropower dams across the globe. And then is the same logic as before. We have the risk change over time, and we have a sort of materiality variable here, which is in this case reservoir capacity, and we can easily spot the big dots and in the red shades is indication of where hydropower of high generation capacity hydropower dams are likely to face much higher risk than what we already see today. And this it's pretty much verified if we don't take actions to try to mitigate and to build resilience in these aspects. And I think with that, I would like to hand back to Ariane, which will conclude.
Thank you. Excellent. Thank you very much. So, yeah, we hope you've had a good overview now of how the new TCFD-aligned scenarios can help companies and investors better understand their future water risks, as well as, and therefore, consider thinking about how that will inform their strategies and response actions to address and mitigate risk and build resilience. Now, do get started. There's a lot of resources available directly on the water risk filter with tutorials and videos. We also have published, I encourage you to check that out, a brief with guidance on the water risk filter scenarios that are available online. But do get in contact if you do want some of our WF expert support for tailored water risk assessment and scenario analysis. So do not hesitate to contact us. And we encourage you to get started, and we'll be also publishing a whole bunch of new reports on resilience with regards to how water stewardship can help business build climate resilience, as well as some application of the water filter scenarios on agricultural commodities. So do watch out for some new reports and guidance material coming out, as well as continuous work with CDSB to support the development of the wider guidance documents. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for these amazing presentations. This was, I think, very insightful. Now we do have a bit of time for Q&A. Let's have a look if we have any questions so far. And I wanted to remind our audience that they can submit their questions using the social media. So you basically have to type in your question under the video, or you can send us an email by info@cdsb.net. So this is a question to Rafael. As these scenarios that you mentioned are based on projections, how did you deal with the model's uncertainties? How do you know if they are accurate?
Yes, actually, that's a very good question, and it's a bit hard to say that we actually don't know if they're really accurate, but we do use the best available data. And the idea to deal with uncertainties is to use today ensemble projections, which is not only the results of one single model and its uncertainties and assumptions and inputs, but is using multiple runs that together have a slightly variation, but then we just take values when all models, at least most of the models, agree at the same sign of information. Then we take this information as valid and we apply it. But on the other hand, scenario analysis in general is a method to deal with uncertainties. We are not showing that pessimistic scenario will be exactly like this, and then you choose this scenario instead of, or other way around. Or actually, all people would choose between, okay, I want to take the optimistic scenario not to face those high risks, but this is actually not possible. Scenario analysis is a way to show how possible futures look like, and then is for us to understand what's the range of risks from very low risks or low risks if we follow a more optimistic pathway, but can be actually much higher if we end up following a more pessimistic pathway. So we have to prepare for this range of risks between the optimistic to a more pessimistic scenario.
Thank you very much. We have another question coming through from LinkedIn for the water risk filter. What granularity scale is the underlying modeling for the water risk filter? Is it at catchment level or fixed grids across the world? Who would like to take this question?
I think I'm taking this again. It varies from model to model. When we're talking about water scarcity, sometimes some data is at basing scale because it's about water use and water availability within a basin. But in other cases, as flooding, it's pretty much at grid cell. And at the water risk filter, what the work we do is actually a compilation of different data sets with different resolution. And we compile everything together to the same resolution, which we called hydrobasins level 7. It's a very well-known framework of delimitation hydrobasins or river basins, where we look at this exactly same location, all the information from the different models, so that this can be easily comparable. Otherwise, it would be very difficult to deal with different data sets, the models with different resolutions. And I think this is the essential part of the work at the Water is Filter is to make these different data sets, different resolutions accessible to the community, much more easy accessible to the community.
Thank you very much. I suppose you're also seeing the chat function with the questions right now. I hope you do, but anyways, I'm going to read them out. So is there any economic sector asset type vulnerability analysis available for water scenarios as per climate change? I suppose this might be a question for everyone. I guess it's who would like to take this question?
I think I can start on that. The Water is Filter has 25 different industry sectors, and each of those sectors have a different weighting for those risk categories. For example, agriculture, it's heavily weighted on water scarcity, while other sector, for example, and let me say agriculture, and not so heavily weighted on reputation because it's a food security issue. And so when water is used on reputation, water using agriculture is not so bad as when water used for mining, for example, in reputation aspects. So each industry has a combination of weightings. So this is the way we deal with water challenges in different industries.
Yeah, and maybe I'll just add then to this is that indeed the water is filter both for the risk assessment and the scenario analysis. We do account for which type of industries your sites or part of your value chains belong to, and so actually we do contain default industry specific weightings for a total of 25 industry categories to that we've developed actually in collaboration with multiple stakeholder consultations, expert reviews, CDP data, etc. But the industry weightings are applied so that basically any company can use the tool from any sector. We apply some weightings based on what type of risk are most critical for your for that sector, with some weightings to calculate both the basin as well as the operational risks. And you can have a look at that more specifically in our water system methodology documentation, which is available online. But yeah, we do allow any user from any economic sector can use the water filter tool. That's what I'm trying to get at. But for sure, if you're maybe thinking about which for large companies with maybe multiple sites and large value chains, if you're trying to get started on a risk assessment and analysis to assess your full value chain and where to focus on which portion of the value chain, we do encourage you to think about what is the most strategic importance to your business in terms of greater production volume or value, but also which portion of the value chain also has the highest dependence and or impact on water. So think about these two considerations when you're trying to think about which sites or assets to focus your analysis as a first step.
If I can add just one comment on this great answer. So of course, if you like, the first step to understand the vulnerability of your company is to understand the water dependencies that your business has. So like, great that like the WWF water filter risk has some like support also in this direction. Of course, like what I can add is that there are some sectoral guidance or report around, so like from the mining sector, for example, but also agri-food or textile, that can like at least give you an overview. Of course, a general one. Then you have to like make it like apply it to your company, because like each company has its own specificity in this. But yeah, so that's all the other thing. So if you have in mind any specific sector, just maybe you can drop me an email and we check together if there is something around.
And maybe I'll just add to that is that do check out in our water filter, we have a section with risk reports, many different WF publications actually, where we do analyze water risk across whether it's different agricultural commodities, or we have a great report actually published in this year on water risk in the mining sector, where we analyzed water risk using the water filter on using the SMP mining database to look at water risk exposure across a whole portfolio of mining sites. So there is some really great resources available already to sort of give you the big picture of, water risk for different economic sectors via WWF as well as via the CDSB team. So yeah, do get in touch if you're interested.
Thank you very much. There's another question on alignment, and I think there's a lot to add from every speaker regarding the alignment question. How do these water risk scenarios align with TCFD scenarios, considering companies may be looking at multiple modeling options? Are there any minimum requirements for a company to be selective on choice of scenarios? Who would like to begin?
Again, to start on that, I'm not sure if I understood the question, but what I think is the water risk filter scenarios, they are aligned with TCFD in terms of using IPCC projections as well as socioeconomic projections, climate projections, pretty much IPCC, which are the most common ones, as well as socioeconomic changes, which are the SSP, which stands for Shared Socioeconomic Pathways, which are also the more common one for socioeconomic developments over time. And given that we use these two set of projections, and now I think companies can use and align when they are designing their scenarios and their pathways to align with these, because it's pretty much straightforward. SSP1, which is the more sustainable socioeconomic developments, it's very well aligned with a word in the climate projections, a word of lower CO2 emissions, a more RCP 2.6 or 4.5 or so. On the other side, the SSP3, it's a more unequal word in terms of socioeconomic developments. It's better aligned with CO2 emissions in higher levels of CO2 emission, which is the RCP 8.5. And so we have these three pathways, and then companies will need to match with these three. But of course, in the future, we want to expand and perhaps get to 4 pathways, and then we'll be even more flexible for companies to align with their scenarios, pathways, design.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Francesca, go.
Juliana, if I can also add just a simple comment. So, of course, the TCFD recommendation asks for the application of, for example, different climatic scenarios, and including the 2 degrees one. But and the WWF water filter risk does these also integrating water, because of course, as we know, environment is connected. So we have to start to integrate all the elements. The important thing, as Rafael was very well underlining before during the presentation, is that the importance is to provide a sort of range of possible future impacts or risks, and provide the resilience of the companies in this range of possible future scenarios. So this is a crucial thing. So including the 2 degree scenarios, but also trying to give a whole range of the future scenarios, so from pessimistic to optimistic to pessimistic, as the WWF water risk filter does. So that's just to summarize. I hope it helps.
Thank you very much. And since you have spoken and we're on the topic of the alignment, perhaps there's something you'd like to add, Francesca, regarding in general alignment to other standards and recommendations when it comes to the water guidance.
Sure, yes. So just to a couple of additional details. So of course the water guidance, it's not a a new standards or a new framework. Is like it based on the CDSB framework that it's like already on the market, it's well used, and what we have done was to like review and like analyze the existing standards and framework on water reporting and extrapolates like crucial reporting elements. So we haven't invented anything new or reinvented the wheel. So like the elements are already like the water elements are already in the existing water standards and framework, and companies are already reporting to GRIs, HASB, or responding to CDP questionnaires, for example. So the thing is that we took those elements, for example, from CDP questions, and we adapt and provide suggestion on how to integrate this information into mainstream report to adapt this information more to the capital market audience and like investors. So like the guidance would be again fully aligned, and we will provide also a sort of mapping between the different standards and framework, like hoping that support report preparers.
Thank you very much. We have another question that came in through email, and this is a question for Ariane or Rafael. If an asset manager wants to use the tool, can he or she see something useful without also having access to information regarding all different operational sites from the companies she or he is investing in? Having access to this information may be a challenge if we're looking at large portfolios with many holdings.
Yes, I'm happy to try this, answer this question as best I can. So indeed, I think if I understand well the question, and I will just clarify, in terms of information needed at a minimum, it is important indeed to use the water filter tool to have location information of sites or assets in order to analyze both current and future water risks, basin water risks. But and additionally, if operational data is available, then you can also conduct a more comprehensive risk assessment looking at both basin and operational. But in any case, even without providing or not having any specific location data, users can still explore in the tools, in the water filter tool, the different water risk maps of both current and future risks, as well as there are country profiles with country level risk information available. So these are good starting points to start to understand, with regards to location, what are the types of water risks. But as you are all aware, and of course, this is a very common saying, but a critical one, is that unlike carbon, water is local. So indeed, because of that, it does really require location information to understand what types of water risk you're facing in a particular location. And therefore, as an investor, we do encourage you to start asking and ask companies to disclose and share that sort of specific asset level data, which is fundamental. And with this location information, it is then possible to accurately evaluate both current and future water risks. Now, I would say there is from investors you have a say, and you should be pushing towards more disclosure. And with the momentum with TCFD, there is a pressing need and more urgency on this matter of greater transparency and disclosure on asset data. But on the bright side, I would say that there is more and more we're seeing asset data becoming available, which is really excellent, in particular for some key sectors such as the mining, energy, and apparel and textile sector. And so, for example, as I said, we published a report at the start of the year analyzing water risk of over 3,700 active mining sites across the world using the S&P Global Mining Database. And so with these sort of asset level data sets becoming available in different sectors, becoming more and more, and hopefully more and more open source, we do really encourage this. There is an interesting and really new opportunities to explore deeper analysis and understanding of water risks. And we're strongly working on this and encouraging from this greater, and we're seeing a greater explosion with regards to availability of asset data. So we're very hopeful that in the future, but as I said, there are already some sections of the tool with the maps or the country profiles to get you started, even if you don't know the exact location of the asset or site.
And if I can just
Please.
add a positive comment on this, we saw, while reviewing some mainstream reports, so ANMO reports and focusing on water, we saw some companies disclosing like maps with at least the most critical locations in terms of water. So again, maybe it's not you don't have the exact geographical coordinates, but you can just have a first idea. And then, of course, you can ask being an investor to companies to disclose about the location. Because as Ariane said, it's fundamental when you are dealing with water. So
they can disclose, ask to disclose the location, or ask them to use tools such as the water filter and report to you with regards to what are their water risks based on their location, depending on whether you want to access the tool directly versus asking, companies directly to report using tools such as WWF water risk filter on water risks based on their location. So yeah, thank you. Any other?
I think
Thank
I
you
can add another point to this discussion. This is all very true, and I think companies today are still starting on these aspects and disclosing, but the ideal word is in the near future, they are disclosing not only all their site asset level, but also all their supply chain. And the water risk filter actually is a tool exactly for that. So the users can add different portfolios, so they're of their own sites, but also the supply chain and even the different levels of supply chain to the end consumers, if it's the case. And then you can have a look what are the risk exposure to each of those segments. And it's just a matter of going towards this direction.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid we're running out of time, so I'd like to thank you once again for your amazing presentations. I'd like to thank our audience for their questions and attention. Do please check out the water the water tool from the WWF water tool. We will send all the links as a follow-up in an email. You will find the links to the tool on our social media accounts. Finally, we'd like to thank the Moore Foundation and the LIFE program for their support in regards to our work on the water-related guidance. We would also like to encourage you to subscribe to us on social media and subscribe to our newsletter to find out more about the upcoming events, including the consultation on water guidance later this month. Besides, there are many interesting projects such as free consultation support to EU companies. So if you are based in EU, please reach out to our corporate engagement manager, find out more about what kind of consultation we're offering for free. Thank you once again, and have a good day, have a good evening. Goodbye.